We're talking today about roadway safety and everything we need to do to keep our firefighters safe on these roadway incidents, which we run a lot more of than I think a lot of folks appreciate. With us today is Assistant Chief Alan Baldwin from the Stafford County, Virginia Fire Rescue Department. He's also the president of the Cumberland Valley Volunteer Firemen's Association. Dr. Scott Parr from Embry-Riddle. He's a traffic engineer and working on a lot of different projects with the Emergency Responder Safety Institute. And Lieutenant Brady Robinette from the Lubbock, Texas Fire Department. And we're also going to talk about a fourth gentleman who was unable to stay with us. I had the opportunity to talk with him this morning, and that's Nicholas Calvano. He was the engineer at the National Bureau of Standards before it was called NIST. Many of you know NIST from the Dan Madrikowski times. Okay, Dan Madrikowski worked at NIST, now at UL. Well, this was the forerunner. The National Bureau of Standards was the forerunner for NIST. So Mr. Calvano was the original engineer that worked on the fire service helmet standard that is now NFPA 1971. So I had an opportunity to talk to him this morning. Unfortunately, he couldn't stay with us, but at 87 years old, I understand why. But we were able to capture some video, and I want you to listen to what he had to say about what the problem was back then and why they did what they did. So let's listen to this. So we know why they undertook the research, right? You said that you were the only one that had done any helmet research at all, so they were looking to make a stronger, better helmet for firefighters?
Well, yeah, and what they did know, they knew there were some serious concerns because there actually were fire helmets that were melting. They were making them out of high-density polyethylene.
Yeah.
You know, and that's okay if it doesn't get too hot. So there was a need. They recognized that, and the only information they had was in those days was the people who were making construction helmets were the same ones who were going to make fire helmets. And the only thing, they only had two choices: either the web construction to attenuate the impact energy, or the styrofoam construction.
Yeah.
And that would never work for fire helmets because it just gets too hot.
So helmets were melting on their heads. That was part of the problem that they were dealing with. That's just one element that we're talking about today. Is we're going to end up talking about roadway safety in helmets, and we're going to talk with Brady about it. But Brady, I want you to relay to our viewers a story that Nick told you, Mr. Calvano told you, and before you do that, let's go back. Okay, let's go back to 1975 when he was doing that study. And I want you to be ready to tell that story for us, okay? So it was 1975. Gerald Ford was the president. A gallon of gas, 44 cents. The average price of a new car, $4,250. The average new house, $39,000. The average annual salary, $14,100. There was no internet. There was no social media. So to do the research they needed to do back in 1975, they had to go to a library. Literally had to go to the Library of Congress to try and find the literature. There just wasn't any research to go along with that. So I tell you all that to explain that things were done a lot differently back then, both from a perspective of what we were wearing, but also from the perspective of being able to drive those code standards and drive those improvements. It wasn't as simple as just Googling it, which is, you know, the common phrase everybody says now. So we talked with Brady, who had talked to Mr. Calvano about how they tested back in the 70s and before. So can you relay that story for our viewers of how where today, you know, we've got some very rigid standards and rigid ways that they do testing. How did they do the testing for helmet safety back then?
So this testing that he was talking about was done right before he took over, but when they were impact testing a helmet to see what potential damage it'd do to your head, they were strapping helmets on monkeys, strapping monkeys in chairs or whatever the case is, and sending them down a pathway to a collision, and then they determined what head damage might be in humans. And so that was just the era of when he started this.
Yeah, you know, and when we talk about all of those things and no internet and none of that, but they were literally testing helmets on monkeys.
Yeah.
As a researcher, you would say that wouldn't pass IRB approval today.
Yeah, I don't think it'd pass many people's approval today. So I'm with you on that. And clearly the helmets is one piece of this puzzle. So Chief Baldwin, I want you to give our viewers a sense of the 10,000 foot level of what roadway safety is all about. What is it that we're trying to drive home in this whole message that ResponderSafety.com works on? What is it that we're trying to drive home? What is it they need to be concerned about?
What we're trying to drive home is, quite frankly, is that everybody does go home at the end of the day. Get out there, do our job, get off the roadway. But to do that properly, and what we've been trying to do for over the last 10, 12 years, actually a little longer, is to set us up with addressing early warning, early advance warning, personal protective equipment, wearing your vest on the roadway, apparatus positioning, blocking, working with the traffic operations centers and the various DOTs, and the common training throughout with traffic incident management on the federal and state level.
Yeah. So in recognizing it's not just fire and EMS, there was a fantastic video, the HATS video from back whenever it was, but can you talk about who all those players are? Absolutely.
It's not just fire, as you said, fire rescue and EMS. It's law enforcement, it's towing, it's transportation agencies, it's the utility companies, anybody working on or alongside the roadway.
Yeah, and it was the 10 hats, right?
The 10 hats.
Yeah, I couldn't think of the name. It took me a minute.
Yes.
But the 10 hats video, get a chance, Google it. You can Google now. Go ahead and Google that. It's a great video to be able to drive home who's involved in all this.
Actually, that's still available on our website.
Yep, there you go.
ResponderSafety.com.
Yep. So ResponderSafety.com, look that up. The 10 hats video is a great video, especially for new folks coming in to be able to understand the scope of who's there. So all of those things we need to do. We want to do early warning. We want to do blocking. We want to wear vests. We want to have high visibility, all of that. So Dr. Parr, I know you're working on a study right now with Emergency Responder Safety Institute on lighting. So can you tell us kind of where we're going with that study and where you are right now with it?
Yeah, so working on this project is myself and Dr. John Bullow of Rensselaer Polytechnical University. Mm-hmm. And what we're doing is we're looking at different light colors, light intensity, and emergency lighting modulation. And we're trying to identify that sweet spot there that's going to trigger a behavioral response in a driver approaching an incident scene. So what we have is a simulated fire truck, back of a fire truck in a fend-off position. And then we've set up an incident scene around the fire truck. And then we have a firefighter silhouette standing in various positions around the fire apparatus. And we have different drivers come in, and the driver drives around several times. We have 16 different scenarios they drive around. And in those scenarios, we tweak the intensity of the LED lighting. So, it starts off with the standard intensity, and then we reduce that. Mm-hmm. We start off with the standard colors, which are predominantly red in most jurisdictions. Some jurisdictions allow blue. But we start off with red, then we switch to blue, and then yellow, and then white. And then we play around with the modulations, kind of like the flicker rate of the lights. And we see where the driver begins to deviate the driving path around the crash scene. Mm. So we want to encourage drivers to provide lateral offset from the scene, so allowing more space when passing the scene. But we also want to find out where and when the driver can recognize the firefighter within the silhouette of the backlighting. So if they see, the idea is that if they see the firefighter sooner, people respect that more than they may respect a cone by the side of the road.
Are you doing all this in a virtual environment, or this is in
No, this is live action on a closed circuit roadway with real drivers.
Wow. Okay. So let me ask you, Chief. He's an engineer. Why are we listening to him? And if Dan Madrykowski's watching this, he'll understand. Why are we listening to him?
It kind of goes back to what we talked about with the testing in the monkeys and the helmets. Again, technology has changed. When you look at some of these lighting studies, we go back to the early SIL beam lights, the halogen lights, the early strobes, but we've always focused on the apparatus, where this study is focused on the newer technology and actually being able to see the responder. Where before we've really been worried about and focused on the apparatus.
Yeah, and no disrespect for Dr. Parr at all. It's again, for those that experienced the flow path studies, they will acknowledge that there was a lot of pushback from the fire service about us adopting flow path management as a way of doing business. Very similar to what I'm sure Dr. Parr is going to experience in some of the talking about reducing lighting or increasing lighting or whatever it is he's going to do. People are going to go, who are you to tell us? So I'll tell you just briefly, he has a long lineage of family that's in both law enforcement and the fire service. So he's not disconnected from the fire service at all, and is very vested in making sure that we have the things that we need and that they're the right way.
As part of the research study, though, we're partnering with the Cumberland Valley Volunteer Firemen's Association.
Yeah.
We're getting those responders into
Yeah.
the simulation room. I mean, we had the Volusia County Fire Rescue come and tweak our experimental design. We had we set up like 3 or 4 hours where they said, no, your cone's got to be here. You got to put a vest on the silhouette. It's not realistic if you don't have a vest. They said your fireman would be situated here. He's got to have two ways out of any situation. So you can't put him here. It doesn't make sense to put him here. You want to put him here. Yeah. And we marked and we took all those notes. So it's a matter of understanding that I don't know fire service, appreciating that, and then bringing in those responders, those boots on the ground to say, no, dummy, it's got to be set up this way. And I'm going, well, I need an experimental setup that I can repeat over and over again. No, it doesn't work that way. Right. Set it up. So we have a realistic setup thanks to the Cumberland Valley Volunteer Firemen's Association recruiting in the Volusia County fire guys to come and direct us and say, hey, no, it's got to be like this. And they spent a lot of time with us. We're very thankful for that partnership. And
I appreciate you understanding. It's a culture, right? Everything we're going to talk about is a culture. So, Brady, you've heard Chief Baldwin talk about the depth of everything that we need to do, and you've heard Dr. Parr talk about the lighting study that's going on, and he talked about a silhouette, and he talked about the different things that they're using. But let's talk real life for a second, because the firefighter that's standing in there where the silhouette is probably wearing a helmet, although a survey that the Emergency Responder Safety Institute said that only 42% of the firefighters acknowledge wearing a helmet most of the time on roadway incidents. But he's probably wearing a helmet. It just happens to be the same helmet that he or she is wearing going into a burning building. Why is that a problem?
Well, when I got a chance to speak to Mr. Calvano earlier today, I think he actually said it in the interview, he mentioned it. The only thing those two have in common, he was actually talking about ballistic helmets, is that it protects heads, and that's the only commonality there. The forces a responder will see on the roadway are drastically different than what a structural helmet was designed for. It has that webbing suspension system in it, and it's for impacts from the top, and it's really good at protecting you from impacts from the top. It's not so good, not very good at all, of even staying on the head, but if it does stay on the head, it doesn't protect you from a side or a lateral impact. You need foam, like in motorcycle helmets that are on the side of your head, and it cradles your head like an egg crate would, and so you need that foam or that lateral protection, and you need the helmet to stay on the head.
But until they find a foam that's not going to burn in a fire, it's not going to be the same helmet.
That's right. It's not, I don't believe technology exists right now, unfortunately, where one helmet could serve both purposes. It's just not feasible with today's technology.
But Dr. Parr, you're going to check that, right? You're going to talk to your...
We have some materials experts. So my fundamental training is a civil engineer. We have special materials experts. I mean, they use fire resistant across the street at the NASCAR raceway. They have fire resistant composite materials. So, I mean, there's opportunities. I'm not sure, I'm not a helmet expert, right?
Right.
And I'm certainly not a materials expert. But there are emerging composite that are lightweight, fire resistant. Then the question, of course, comes into shock absorbance, and where does that get placed in terms of a helmet, particularly for responders working roadside.
Mm-hmm. The structural helmets pose so many other issues as far as impact protection too. The large finial and the shield on front, it's a huge issue. If you talk about impact protection, the helmet standards for motorcycles call those projections, external projections in that case. The helmet needs to be smooth on the outside where the head will slide along, as opposed to digging in and tweaking the neck and stopping the sudden movement. You want it to slide, you don't want it to dig in. Those projections can also cause rotational points. You don't want that. None of that's ideal when we're talking about crash protection and things that are important in like motorcycle helmets, which is, I think, probably the most relevant standard.
Closest thing.
To what's exist right now. But, you know, what I'm really proposing is a new standard specifically for roadway helmets. We have standards in NFPA for structural helmets, wildland helmets, Swiftwater, and tech rescue. But the thing we do way more often than any of those is roadway incidents. I think it deserves its own standard with a helmet that specifically protects us from that extreme danger. And it's not just moving vehicles. Roadway debris is a pretty significant hazard. Just recently, someone posted on a comment to the Emergency Responder Safety Institute's Facebook page, and they had a picture where I think it was a lug off a guardrail popped up off the roadway and hit him in his helmet. Luckily, he had a helmet on, and luckily it hit up above where the helmet actually existed, not down here, and it put a significant dent in that helmet. And so it's not just even the vehicles, it's, you know, the moving, the roadway debris working in the confines of a vehicle, airbag deployment, other debris coming off that vehicle if there is airbag deployment. So we really just want to protect the most important organ in our body, our head.
So Chief, you've heard him talk about lights, you've heard him talk about helmets, it's all money, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, but your people are more important than that money. I think we would all agree that protecting our people is what we're looking for. So recognizing that we're going to have to find the money to do these things. We're going to have to find the money to do the right thing. Who else needs to be involved in this at you know, the upper levels?
Again, personnel is the greatest asset we have in the fire service. With any job, personnel always are. And again, as you said, the financial ramifications or needs or something has to be consistently addressed, but it's everybody from the grassroots to the upper echelons, the leadership, not only the involved departments and agencies, but the local governments, the county level, the city, the government level, to get that support. Because again, with any PPE, what's the cost of the PPE? I know that's been said different. You know, what's the value of a life, or value? Right. You know, the value. How much do you value your head, or what's the value of a life? But to put that price tag on it, it's something it's got to be planned for, managed. But again, through support of other organizations, through grant funding, hopefully at the federal level, and you know, educating the fire service and the other related agencies that work with us on the roadways, the importance of this. But again, funding's available, made available, part of the planning and budgeting process. Yeah, and I think that you mentioned the federal process. That's one of the things that is a pet peeve of mine. You know, the fire service is under FEMA, and the EMS is under Department of Transportation, and of course forestry under Interior, and then 911 under different groups of people. We've got this strange federal parent that we've got to figure out how to corral. And I don't know whether the feds enter into the funding stream for the universities to be able to help with that research. I mean, are there partnerships is this the type of partnership where we build that groundswell up to the federal government? So our lighting study, for example, is funded by FEMA through the U.S. Fire Administration. So they contracted with Cumberland Valley, and then the Cumberland Valley said, we have contractors that can help answer these questions. So then they reached out to me and my colleague John Bullow to help pull this research together. But that's been a powerful partnership, yeah. And it's really partnering with agencies, volunteer agencies like the Cumberland Valley Volunteer Firemen's Association, and through their networks of people, they found people like me, like John, and a number of other contractors that help, you know, explain that, hey, we have this problem, firefighters, EMS, police officers, we have these problems as responders. Somebody in the federal government gets wind of that and says, oh, okay, we're going to fund that. For example, Federal Highways, they're funding a series of responder research right now. A gentleman named Paul Joden at Federal Highways, he's funding a bunch of a big funding effort to quantify the impacts of the move over law. Yeah. And that was released last year. So, you know, Congress got together and said, hey, we have this issue. Like a group of congressmen, I forget their names. I believe it was Duckworth, maybe. I think she was heavily involved in this and saying, hey, look, responder safety is a big issue. We've now done, you know, the move over law in 50 states and the district. What's been the impact of that? Right. So then that freed up some money for Federal Highways to come in and say, hey, let's go to our contractors and see who can best solve this issue. Yeah. To jump in on the technology side that we were talking about, again, technology and how it's accepted has always been an issue in the fire service with tradition, whether we're talking about helmets, the lighting, and everything else. But where we're trying to get to with the funding side of things is it's education. Well, one of the things that ResponderSafety.com has been working on, and the Institute has been working with FHWA to define what a struck-by incident is. Even that basic education to get that information out, just not even for the fire service, but it's everybody that's involved in this. We look at this as just a fire service problem, and it's not. It's a problem for all the emergency response folks, anybody that's working, again, on or alongside the roadway, and for the people that are traveling.
Yeah, so the funding's not needed for just equipment.
No, it's everything from public education to PPE, for the research to support it. We don't even want to talk about the autonomous vehicles and those type of things, but it's just...
Well, he probably wants to talk about that.
Absolutely. But we have to plan for it, but it's not just educating our own people, it's educating the people that support us and above us. And again, something as simple as defining what a struck-by incident is. So if on fire service or law enforcement or DOT, we're using the same definition even for data collection and those type of things.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you think about the funding? Is the funding for the proportion of funding here, what's out askew?
Well, I think it's completely out askew, both from a federal funding level and then even at a local department level. I don't know that we're distributing our funds as appropriately as we should, but just think about a structure fire for a second. We have a $500,000 fire engine, roughly, I don't know the prices, I'm not a chief, but $2,000 set of PPE, a $3,000 SCBA pack. We have, a bunch of nozzles, all the hose, extremely expensive equipment. It's needed, no doubt, but something that we're running 2/3 of the time more often is the roadway incidents. And what money are we putting towards that at the local levels, the fire department levels? Well, it's typically 5 cones and, maybe something else, maybe an advanced warning sign or something. But, it's disproportionate if you think about that. And if we talk about risk and protecting our people, I think we really need to start thinking about redistributing some funds towards things that are going to protect our crews on the roadway.
It's really what's your investment in your biggest asset. What's your investment?
Yeah.
So what else are we dealing with in the research world and the different projects that I know some of you guys are working on?
Yeah. So we have a proposal out right now, or I guess a request for funding out right now. Working again with the Cumberland Valley guys and a private company called Haas Alerts, and we're trying to make connected PPE for roadside responder safety. So the idea is that autonomous vehicles are coming. You see them on the road now in some degree or another. I'll give you the example of the Tesla vehicle. Well, if you read the news, the Tesla vehicle, the autopilot has been crashing into the back of fire apparatus. So fire apparatus are at a scene in fend-off position. The Tesla vehicle is not expecting this situation, so it's trying to switch control back to the driver. Well, if the driver's not paying attention, then there's a lapse there, and into the back of the fire truck, the car goes. So the idea is that autonomous vehicles are predominantly based, if not solely based, on onboard sensors. And those onboard sensors use a mix of cameras and LiDAR to generate a 3D image of the world around them. Well, a fire apparatus blocking a scene is also a line of sight obstruction for that autonomous vehicle to any responders that are in or around the scene. So the idea is that partnering with Haas Alerts, we can make a digital alert of the protective vest, and that alert will notify the autonomous vehicle of the presence of personnel roadside. Wow. So going beyond just the onboard sensors, we now have another layer of safety which allows the autonomous vehicles to see roadside personnel behind walls, behind barriers, outside a line of sight. In addition, we can institute it with a two-way communication to then go ahead and alert the roadside responder that, hey, there's an autonomous vehicle approaching the scene, look out.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing. We know the technology exists for this, right? So,
oh, yeah.
So what else do we have to do? Where are we at from your perspective?
Well, I think with that digital alerting technology, there's a lot of potential. It is needed for the autonomous and autonomous technologies like Dr. Parr mentioned. I think it's also relevant, though, in the regular driver, right? Because how many times are first responders getting hit by regular drivers, not autonomous vehicles, regular drivers? And so the technology that we're talking about there that's going digital alerting, it alerts the regular drivers, the human drivers, 20 to 30 seconds out, saying incident ahead, and and it helps get that attention. What's the missing piece is the adoption at the vehicle level, the car manufacturer level. It needs to be built into the vehicle as part of standard safety equipment like seatbelt, electronic stability control, and all that. And that's missing. That's the missing piece of the puzzle. But it's kind of the chicken before the egg situation, because when these digital alerting companies, there's a couple of them out there, when they call the car manufacturers, Apple CarPlay or whoever it is, Tesla even, and say, hey, will you incorporate this technology? They say, well, how many fire trucks, how many first responders are emitting that digital alert? And they say, well, this many, and it's a small piece of the pie.
Sure.
So then, when you go the other way, when you go to the fire departments to try to sell them this technology, they say, okay, well, how many vehicles are going to actually be receiving this technology? And so it's kind of hung in this piece, and it needs something to tip it over, and that's what I think definitely researchers can help with. I think we need to get that technology standardized where it can be more easily adopted by car manufacturers. Cell phones are another good option for the digital alerting in consumers' hands, because everybody has a cell phone in them. Current technology already exists to know if you're the driver. I don't know how they do it, but all the major insurance manufacturers have technology that records their driving habits and rewards them for good behavior. Well, it knows somehow they're the driver, but technologies like that, I think, have a huge potential. But I think this technology has the potential of really making a huge impact in a reduction of struck-by accidents. I may be in the minority on what I'm about to say, but I think autonomous vehicles will greatly improve struck-by incidents, the reduction of those. I know a lot of people think otherwise, and the incidents like Dr. Parr mentioned with Tesla, it's a new technology, but once we get to substantially to a point where the vehicles on the roadway are substantially autonomous, I think responder struck-by incidents will reduce.
Yeah, I mean, there's a cascade of improvements that need to happen, and a cascade of research that needs to continue to happen for what you just said, I think, to become reality. I would agree with you. You're in the minority in believing that that's the way it's going to be, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. So anything else you guys want to add to this discussion about responder safety and what we're doing on the highways?
One quick question for Dr. Parr and the Lieutenant. We're talking about things we can do with the autonomous vehicles and the drivers and education stuff, but should we also be looking at 1901 and the apparatus standards? Where are we at with, again, us as the fire service, why are we requiring those digital devices to be standard equipment, just like a red light and sirens are in the apparatus? So every piece of apparatus, your numbers, people aren't interested, the Apple CarPlay folks, because of the number of fire apparatus. But should we be pushing the manufacturers through 1901 and the other standards to have that equipment is standard on emergency apparatus, so those numbers increase?
I think we absolutely should, but I think the missing piece of the puzzle is what I mentioned already, is getting that technology standardized, because there's 2 different companies that do digital alerting that I'm aware of right now. But what do you write in the standard? It's got to be this company or this.
Apple and Android,
you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so I think getting it to a standardized communication protocol and all of that, and getting it standardized really is the missing piece of the puzzle to get to that tipping point of where this really starts snowballing and gets a lot larger adoption rate. But I agree, it should eventually be in the 1901 standard where it's required.
Well, we talked about the short game, what we're doing now, and the long game, but there's a middle field in there where the vehicles that are coming out have advanced safety things. The vehicle will stop itself if it detects a proximity. Like, my wife bought a new car, it's 2018, and if you get too close to the car in front of you, it stops. So there's a middle ground in there where you can put the responder or have the responders in control of something that will help trigger that mechanism that's already in there without having to physically put an object in front of them. I think that's kind of where we can make that push over into the field.
A lot of technology out there, a lot of equipment improvements we need to make, a lot of changes that are coming our way, folks. So, gentlemen, I appreciate you joining us today, and to our viewers, thanks for joining us. Have a great day. Keep safe, stay smart, and take care.